Overall, the Phantom Lord arc sits comfortably below the Galuna Island arc for me in terms of preference. It features the first structured instance of an enemy team fighting one-on-one matches against our group of heroes. It introduced both Gajiel and Juvia, who I neglected to mention, who both become mainstays for the remainder of the series, and it gave Lucy a backstory, I guess. Kinda sucks that Lucy is a bad character, but anyway, up next, we're going to be skipping the Loki mini arc for now, so let's jump straight into a fan favorite arc, the... Alright, so this is the best arc, right? Like, of at least the first run of Fairy Tail, right? It kinda has everything you'd ever want. It cuts out any other superfluous character by isolating the main team from the rest of the guild. It has the most interesting setup, is super dynamic and emotionally charged. It has a fantastic ending. The villains are mostly fun and interesting. The fights are badass. It has twists and turns, and is incredibly tense due to the very real threat on one of the main characters' lives, with an equally incredible resolution to the whole conflict. Do I think it could be improved? Absolutely. I even suggested a change back in Galuna Island that I think would make this arc even better, but that's not the point. While most of Fairy Tail hovers around a 3 or a 4 for me on a good day and a 2 on a not so good day, the Tower of Heaven arc sits comfortably around a strong 7 to a light 8, at least in my weird scoring system, which is a combination of my own tastes and not comparing it to anything except other Fairy Tail arcs. Still, it's such a vast improvement over what came before and is so much better than what comes after that I almost want to just stop while I'm ahead. But then I guess we should slow down and get to talking about it in more depth before I make that decision. After the Loki mini arc, which we'll be going over later on in this retrospective, Team Natsu is given tickets to a famous resort, where they're all soon attacked by 4 people who claim to not only be Erza's friends, but who also claim that she betrayed them in the past. For reasons unknown, they kidnap Erza and take her to an island called the Tower of Heaven, with Team Natsu in hot pursuit. There, Erza is to be a sacrifice in a powerful resurrection ritual known as the R system, of which the tower was built on the backs of slaves to bring the dark wizard Zareth back from the dead. In her youth, Erza, along with her kidnappers and the tower's leader, Jalal, were some such slaves. They went through hardship after hardship, with Erza losing her eye and Jalal losing his marbles, where in the end he became possessed by who he believes to be Zareth himself, takes over the construction of the tower, and tricks its inhabitants by saying that Erza betrayed them, while instead he cast her out to gain a whole bunch of magic power as she grew up, which he plans to use for the sacrifice, hence why she was kidnapped only now. In the present, Erza frees herself because she ain't no damsel in distress, and after an emotional reconciliation with her close friend Simon, works with Team Natsu to stop Jalal. The Dark Wizard then employs a team of assassin mages to take care of the rabble, and they do a damn good job all things considering. Even though they're defeated, they take Lucy, Gray, and Juvia out of commission, while heavily weakening Natsu and Erza, leaving Jalal to make quick work of both of them after his plan comes to fruition, and the tower becomes a gigantic magic conduit in-universe called a lacrima. In the end, Simon sacrifices himself to save Erza while Natsu goes Super Saiyan by eating the supercharged magic lacrima like he would eat fire, and defeats Jalal. And though Erza resolves to go through with her own sacrifice to save Natsu as the tower collapses, he also refuses to let that happen and pulls her out of that corporeal magic energy goo, making her promise not to throw away her life like that ever again. There is a lot to love about the Tower of Heaven arc, and it honestly feels like the only arc in the entire show that's been built up to somewhat well, and I think this is going to remain true very far into the future. Every other arc is a brand new conflict with only the barest hint of their existence prior to all of it just happening. The Urashian Sace members are briefly seen in the Tower of Heaven flashbacks, at least in the anime. Mystigan's face reveal in the next arc, I guess, is a setup for Daedalus, etc. However, Seagrain, who plays a key role here, has been a character and was meddling in at least the Galuna Island arc for a until now unknown reason, along with his handler Ultir, who we know is the daughter of Gray's former mentor. As well, there's just a lot of great reveals when it comes to what the show has set up. In this arc, Seagrain, who is a member of the Magic Council that officiates all magical goings-on in the country, tells said council that they're faced with the balance of life and death being threatened with the R system. Seagrain, who looks just like Jalal and is said to be his twin brother, advocates for the use of an apocalyptic magic gun called the Etherian to be used on the tower to destroy it before that balance can be tipped. In the end, there are 2 twists that come from this. First, Seagrain wasn't Jalal's twin, but a magical thought projection that he controls at will. And second, that Jalal actually needed the Etherean to supply the necessary magical energy for the R system. With these two twists, it portrays Jalal as someone so much more powerful and cunning than anyone we've encountered thus far, having had the highest position of authority in the magical world using only half of his power, and being a wizard saint along the lines of Jose and Makarov with only half of his power on top of that, and essentially having the entire main cast wrapped around his finger, to the point that he sees their efforts at thwarting him to be a simple game, where it doesn't matter if he wins or loses because his plan will work anyway. And hell, moving away from twists, there's a bunch of character resolution for Erza in particular, and even a bit of symbolism happening, which is a rare instance for Fairy Tail. To my mind, Erza's right eye, or our left, represents her innocence. It's taken right when things as a slave get super bad, and basically signifies when she stops giving a shit and actually fights back against her captors. And though she's given an artificial eye when she joins Fairy Tail, it still isn't the same. Throughout the show, and especially in this arc, Erza is only ever able to shed tears through her remaining natural eye, symbolizing her continuing to emotionally guard herself and, at least on a subconscious level, keep others at arm's length. It's only after she's free from the burden of her past, of abandoning Jalal and her other friends and accepting the new one she's made in the guild, that she's able to cry from both eyes again, and become more emotionally available. Her innocence, or her heart, perhaps, has been restored to what it was capable of as a child. On a more material level, Erza has always been seen in her armor, except in rare, brief circumstances. And in this arc specifically, she requests to be able to re-equip into her armor upon her kidnapping because she feels safer within it in the face of having to return to the trauma of the Tower of Heaven. During her battle with Ikaruga, Erza ultimately defeats her by shedding her armor, in reference to how her whole character arc is in her learning to become more emotionally mature and open by not guarding herself, but instead risking heartbreak again for the chance of true bonds to be formed with others. This, of course, is shown both ways, with Simon dying and her shedding tears over it, but then her being able to cry from both eyes, as stated above. Really, everything to do with Erza in this arc is excellent, and I think it's a huge reason why the fanbase can't seem to get enough of her. At this point in the series, she isn't a gigantic fucking awful Mary Sue like she becomes later, where she just starts pulling new armors out of her ass to beat whatever second in command she's allowed to fight in that arc. Because she's still, human, Erza is able to really shine here, serving well to demonstrate a sense of inner strength that none of the characters have really shown up to now, except Gray, of course. Her rapid growth through the arc does wonders as well, serving as the backbone for her personality going forward, from a confident, uptight, slightly brash and violent girl, to a more mellow, considerate, and even friendly young woman who truly serves as a maternal older sister character to the rest of the cast. At least for a while, before she becomes Flanderized. In short, this arc sees Erza growing up, and God, I wish that happened for the rest of the characters in this show, or, that it stuck for her, but we'll get to that later. Speaking on Erza more broadly, despite knowing the problems with how she's handled later in the show, I can't help but love her. Maybe I'm as much of a simp over her role in this arc as everyone else, but I really do think that she's the best character out of the main group. At the very least, she never really goes overboard. Everyone else's stupid gimmicks tend to be overplayed or exaggerated, while Erza tends to be the most reserved of the five, which I like. I also like how, though her personal story largely ends here, she remains relevant thanks to several characters being introduced that directly tie into her past, like Jalal coming back, Kagura, though I have my own issues with that, and I think Irene, though I haven't watched the Alvarez arc as of writing this. The biggest issue with Erza is the power scaling present in Fairy Tail. For the sake of comedy, she always has to be able to beat up Natsu and Gray, so canonically speaking, she's always stronger than them. This is in spite of the fact that Erza consistently loses or is stated to be weaker than the big bads of the arcs, while Natsu straight ices literally all of them except for Leon. And even in this arc, Natsu beats Jalal when Erza couldn't by using his Super Saiyan transformation, which he can use regularly later on in the series. Now maybe it's just that I haven't watched that far, so maybe the dynamic changes, but at least post Tartaros, Natsu should technically be canonically stronger than Erza. We'll have to see how that plays out. This is not even going into the aforementioned awful Mary Sue treatment she gets later on. Oh, she's struggling to beat an opponent? Either give her a new armor set or the power of friendship. Wonderful. I'm glad that this is a thing, and by glad, I mean annoyed. Like in the Grand Magic games, for example, they introduced the idea of a second origin, or a separate magic container within someone that normally lies dormant, and the main cast all have this unlocked, Erza included. At no points until the end of the arc is it implied that Erza's process is different, other than that she isn't writhing in agony on the floor like the others because funny. And then, in the final battle of the games, when resident second-in-command Minerva has her dead to rights with OP magic and Erza having a broken ankle, this bitch suddenly releases her own second origin to re-equip into an armor that is stated to be basically immune to all other forms of magic. Like, are you kidding me? And I totally get why Mashima does this with her. Her magic, which allows her to re-equip into different sets of magical armor, is inherently undynamic. Her armor is her armor. There's nothing that she can personally do to make them any stronger or weaker, unless we're running on Gurren Lagann logic, whereas Natsu is able to receive a rage boost when needed to make himself stronger. This is honestly a really interesting limitation in a show about random bullshit power-ups, and it could have led to interesting moments on the same level as Erza shedding her armor here in the Tower of Heaven, but no such opportunity is ever taken again. If you want to see a bunch of episodes dedicated to those ideas, that of like limitations, mechanical parts, that kind of thing, watch any cyborg-focused episode in Teen Titans. The solution that Mashima came up with, meanwhile, is to just keep giving her more powerful armors. So instead of her fights playing out like a Pokemon-esque elemental weakness / status weakness exploiting RPG, where Erza finds interesting or clever solutions to overcome her limitations, her fights are now proper, if dull, shonen fights. Like, Erza is no Saber. She's not going to have a super in-depth sword duel where we hear her internal monologue analyzing her opponent's magic and fighting techniques to find a chink in their defenses to get a glancing blow. She's going to run forward and beat people up, and that's fine. I'm not watching Fairy Tail for its in-depth battle tactics. I'm watching it because it's dumb, mindless shonen trash, and I like that sometimes. Do I wish that I was watching Fairy Tail for all of that other stuff? You bet your bottom dollar, but c'est la vie. Anyway, Erza good in Tower of Heaven, Erza worse later on, but I'm a sucker for redheads, so she's my waifu. In any case, she's not the only one to shine here. In fact, every member of Team Natsu, aside from Gray and Galuna Island, gets probably their best showing in this first chunk of the show. Lucy actually is intelligent by using Juvia's water body to summon Aquarius to turn the tide of the battle, while Gray gets an excellent battle against the owl as he desperately tries to end the fight quickly to go help Erza. Although, quick side note for all the Gray haters out there, this fight is also hilarious. It's framed in this super emotional way. You have flashbacks to Gray and Erza's past interspersed throughout, and Gray is all pumped up and practically radiating main character energy the entire time, and then he finally beats the bird and immediately is told that he's not him and is booted out of the rest of the arc. Thanks, Gray, you did your best, buddy. And lastly, the final battle against Jalal sees Natsu just being at his best in general. He's a bit more complex than he usually is here, and you get a really good sense of his values and how his identity and the identity of his friends is challenged in this arc. He forcibly knocks Erza unconscious so that he doesn't see her cry, stating that he'd always admired her as a strong warrior and didn't want to see her in such a state. And then when Simon sacrifices himself, he's forced to see her cry and becomes uber royally pissed off. While some may find it annoying that he beats up Jalal when he's really Erza's opponent, I think it works well here for a couple of reasons. First, Erza and Jalal already had their confrontation, which Erza decisively won, even if Jalal was holding back at the time. Second, it makes perfect sense given Erza's place in her character arc at this point in the story that she's in no state to fight on her own, so logically speaking, this just makes sense. Third, Natsu's ideological battle with Jalal and Erza's subsequent heroic acts, while shallow, ties so well into the themes of fellowship, emotional vulnerability, and self-sacrifice that I wouldn't have it play out any different. Well, okay, that's a lie. There's a line at the end where Natsu urges Jalal to free himself of Zeref's influence, which I think should have been cut because I don't think Natsu would give half of a shit about Jalal's motivations at this point, but other than that, I consider this fight to be pretty perfect. And honestly, I think my favorite aspect of it is the way that the Super Saiyan transformation is handled. Instead of the power of friendship, the death of a friend, rage, or anything else, there's an in-universe explanation for why Natsu enters this enhanced state called Dragon Force. He can already eat fire to regain stamina and boost his magical abilities, and the Etherian Lacrima is partially fire, so he eats it and absorbs its immense power, pushing him into Dragon Force. This is used again, albeit in a worse instance, with Natsu Natsu's second use of this form, until he finally activates it of his own will on the third attempt, with similar things happening for Gajeel and Wendy, other dragon slayers like Natsu. This is one of the better things that Fairy Tail does, at least for a long while. We aren't going to be getting successively more powerful transformations or combinations of those transformations to resolve conflicts. That method of storytelling has its place even in Fairy Tail, like here in the Tower of Heaven, but for the most part, there's going to be other methods of resolving a conflict. Of course, those methods are often much dumber, but still, it's the thought that counts, right? If the Tower of Heaven arc has a major weakness, it would be twofold. First, it's too short. With only 8 episodes, where the last one is just a denouement after the final battle, this is the shortest arc outside of the Lullaby, Daphne, and Sun Village arcs. It really could have used a couple more episodes and/or manga chapters to flesh out the backstory a bit more. Tying into this issue is that though her connection with Jalal is interesting and engaging, Erza's connection to her other former friends leaves a lot to be desired. Simon simply isn't a compelling character, so I don't care about his sacrifice save for my empathy for what it means to Erza and Jalal. Sho is just a bad character with an even worse English voice actor. He serves as artificial tension when he traps Erza in the card and then runs away, while Miliana and Wally are one-note, one-gimmick characters that never stuck with me. Like, I just finished this arc and I just now had to look up Wally's name. Hell, when Miliana comes back for the Grand Magic Games, I actually had to stop and actively try to remember who she was and why Erza gave a shit about her. It's that bad. Finally, let's look at the opening and ending themes for this arc, which of course stopped playing 4 episodes into the story. The ending theme is Gomenne Watashi, or I'm sorry me, or perhaps more accurately, I'm sorry for being me, performed by Shiho Nanba. While the tune itself isn't my cup of tea, the lyrics I find to fit well with Erza, who features, as it deals with the idea of being ashamed of who you really are inside, just as Erza is ashamed of how weak she perceives herself to be without her armor. It's definitely a major step down from Suiyoku Merry-Go-Round, but then, like, every ending theme is a major step down from that, so I can't really hold it against this one. It's decent, better than the first at least. The opening theme, on the other hand, FT, or I guess, like, Featuring by Funkist, is hands down my favorite opening of the entire show, and that's down to the raw dynamism of the song in combination with the animation during the chorus. This is the first time that fast action has been portrayed effectively in a Fairy Tail opening, and it's not going to come back for a long time until arguably opening 10, though 5 has some good moments for Sakuga too. The effects, the camera work, the pacing, it's all excellent here. I love the Gurren Lagann-esque harmony leading into the chorus, I love the shot where they all leap up to challenge Jalal, I love the final clash between Natsu and Jalal and just how much destruction comes from it. It's all fantastic. This one is definitely light on good imagery, there's nothing really evocative here like in stuff like opening 10, 16, or 21, but it's just so much fun and so hype that I can't get enough of it. Before we move on to the next arc, I do want to take a minute or two and just go over some miscellaneous stuff that I've either glossed over or omitted up to this point. Some good, some bad, mostly just neutral. So the animation has definitely improved going into the Tower of Heaven arc. Up until now, everything has been pretty average looking save for some cool effects or well done composition on a couple shots. Whereas here you get a few really cool action cuts throughout the entire arc, which is great to see and I hope it continues. At the end of this arc and going into the next, both Juvia and Gajeel from Phantom Lord have joined Fairy Tail. This arc does a lot to endear us to Juvia as she's a very nothing character in the Phantom Lord arc, and I think she definitely earns her keep here. We'll speak more about Gajeel next time, though the scene where he takes the beating from the Shadow Triad and then defends Levi when Loxus lashes out at her was a nice moment. There have also been some cuts and changes from the original manga as well. Eye colors are different in some cases, and Gray and Loxus had much different designs in their first manga appearances. But I think most prominently, and this stands out to me mostly because of the kind of disturbing imagery present in the original scene, they cut out an instance here in this music part of episode 41, where they depict Gajeel kidnapping Mira Jane, gagging her, and tying her to a wall in a very suggestive position in a very skimpy outfit with very sexual relations-y framing. Look, I'm as kinky as the next guy, but even if it's for a comedic moment just after that, I'm glad the scene was cut from the anime, because I don't like to see characters in that type of position unless it actually serves the narrative, which, Yeah, this one was for fan service because anime is the worst. Okay, finally, at the end of the Lullaby arc, the Magic Council arrests Erza for use as a scapegoat for the destruction caused during that arc. So this kind of retaliatory action is never mentioned again, which I find hilarious. The closest we get is the Phantom Lord arc, where some knights question Fairy Tail and find them innocent because, you know, they were attacked and were just defending themselves during that battle. I guess you could also count their actions in the Eurasian Seis and Tenro Island arcs, but both of those are so brief and inconsequential that I'm just left shaking my head at their inclusion at all. And even then, that's not even the Magic Council itself, it's their military unit, which runs mostly autonomously under the Slahar guy. Going forward, especially because they aren't needed to continue the Seagrain angle, the Magic Council is going to become such a non-entity that you can basically forget they exist. Overall, however, Tower of Heaven is a phenomenal arc, even if it's criminally short. Like I said, it's a strong 7 to a light 8, and depending on my mood, it may rise higher than that based on select scenes. Natsu and Erza never get better than they're depicted here in terms of character depth and growth, and the other characters' roles are nothing to sneeze at either. If you're looking for the best that at least early Fairy Tail has to offer, look no further. But with that, let's move on to the next arc, the